I've always been able to, the whole group is going to say, if I speak to a dark spot, take my strength, etc. It is more rare.
Usually.
I had no idea that we were ready.
So we're all gonna say it all together.
Yeah.
In unison. Yeah. Or sort of unison. I mean, you're a pastor. You know.
It's like a choral reading.
That's what I was just thinking. We've got to have some ideas that don't come this way.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 2nd meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Franzen. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. And we are going to try something new this evening, and we are going to all read our purpose statement, and we invite anyone else who would like to read the purpose statement to join us as well. The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential. All right, and just as a note to folks who are here, if you are wanting to speak this evening, either as part of our discussion items or part of our public forum, there's signups in the back of each corner here, and if you're joining us online, you can sign up online. We will leave those open for about 3 more minutes, and then we'll collect those. Okay, we are going to start off the evening tonight with celebrations and recognitions, beginning with the Boone Story Reading Council Award winners, and I'll turn it over to Eric Smith.
So this is my honor. This is Sophia. Welcome, Sophia, to the Ames School Board. So we're here to recognize and celebrate 3 Meeker Elementary students who are recognized for their superb writing skills at the Boone Story Reading Council. Sophia here, along with a classmate, Olivia, who couldn't be here tonight, placed 1st and 2nd place in the 5th grade stories competition. And Olivia Roberts placed 2nd in the 4th grade poems. Now, Sophia here also placed 1st place in the 5th grade stories at the State of Iowa Writing Contest. Wow. So I asked Mrs. Schott to come over here, and she was integral in helping make some of this happen. And so I'm going to turn the microphone over to her, and then we're going to have a little question and answer with Sophia as well.
Good evening. I'm Erica Schott, the librarian at Meeker. This school year, I was fortunate to win a 1-year membership to the Boone Story County Reading Council. Because I'm a member of the council, it has allowed opportunities for my students to participate in the local and state writing contests. Writing benefits our students now and well into the future. Organizing one's thoughts or information to produce a finished product helps students develop important reading and writing skills and supports the Iowa Core Curriculum standards. Creating stories and poems for a specific purpose and with an audience in mind helps students define who they are as writers and gives them encouragement to further develop and use those skills well into their adult lives. I encouraged our 3rd through 5th graders to enter the contest, and several entered. And in February, we received word that 3 of them won at the local level. The students recognized were 4th grader Olivia Roberts. She wrote a poem titled June and July. And then we had 5th grader Olivia Patterson place 2nd with her short story titled The Secret of Westport Island. And 5th grader Sophia Sullivan here with us tonight. Both these girls are with us tonight now. Who placed 1st for her short story titled The Man in the Mountains at the local level, and also placed 1st place at the state level. She has been invited to attend the Iowa Reading Council Conference in June to receive recognition. Please join me in celebrating these young authors.
So I had an opportunity to talk with Sophia and some of her family before we started the school board meeting. And so I'm really interested, Sophia and Olivia, I want you to share as well, where you get some of your ideas for some of your stories.
Well, some of my ideas are from my family and the stuff I read just take little bits of everything and mix it into something great.
I take a lot of inspiration from things I find around myself. And sometimes I find myself just trying to rhyme or find things like that.
So Olivia, I'll start with you. When you found out that you placed so well in this competition, how did that make you feel?
Very excited and proud that I was able to do something.
Sophia, how about you?
I was a little surprised at first. I don't know. I thought I wrote something pretty good, but I didn't think I could actually win. So
I think we all know where we landed on that. Well, I want to thank both of you for what you did. Truly amazing stuff. I want to encourage you to keep writing. You're authors. So please keep writing. Thank you, families, for being here tonight. And now I want to give the school board an opportunity to make any comments.
Well, it's always fun to get to start our meeting with a celebration like this, and we are so proud of you both and can't wait to see what you do as you move on with your writing careers. There'll be lots more opportunities to write as you enter middle school and high school, and we can't wait to see what you do. Congratulations. All right, our next item is School Board Appreciation Month, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Vincent.
Thank you. Well, May is School Board Recognition Month, and we are so very pleased to be able to celebrate the contributions of our own Ames Community School District board members in the entire state. All school board members are being honored. We, of course, think we have some of the finest. School board members, as you know, are elected by the community, but they serve as unpaid volunteers and unpaid innovators in support of students and staff through time in monthly meetings like you're seeing this evening. Can't imagine how many hours spent in reviewing board materials, communicating with citizens, exploring learning opportunities, and attending school functions and activities. Those are just a few of the things, many things in their job descriptions. Most importantly, the board is charged with being the navigator for the entire system. They set the direction, oversee the budget, develop policies, and make decisions that impact the entire community. So it is my pleasure this evening to offer a very small token of appreciation, one of maybe many for some of you, IASB certificates. Doctors Becker, Smith, and Winfrey completing their first year. And we have directors Lankitis and Shields Cook in their third year. I hope I have those correct. Thank you. And then we get into the longer terms, Dr. Beerbaum with 4 years. And believe it or not, Director Franson was 7 years. Thank you to all of you for your service and for continuing to put in the time that I know you do in preparation and attending and all of those things that go with being a member of a very important function in the community, even if it is volunteer service. So we very much appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, we will move on to our discussion items on the agenda here. And our first will be our board committee updates, beginning with the policy committee.
I do not, I'm still pulling things up, but.
Oh, do you want me to start with someone else?
Yeah,
Okay, great. Can we start with teaching and learning?
Sure. At the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting, we reviewed the language of the policy that was developed for curriculum development. and made some suggested edits. And then we began to look at the policy for curriculum implementation. Jeff Hawkins and Aaron Miller are going to do a little more reviewing of that policy before we look at it again. But we did have a big discussion on what types of things are looked at in developing curriculum. And one thing is to make sure that it complies with all applicable federal and state laws. That took most of the meeting. We had a brief discussion on education 6 to 8 literacy, and we're going to have a bigger discussion about that next month. And we set our next meeting for May 17th at 4:30 p.m.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for teaching and learning? We will move on to our school improvement and advisory committee. Is that you again, Director Linkage?
It is me again. We had another interesting meeting. I can't remember the date now. What date was that?
The 25th.
The 25th. The first thing we talked about was the definition of bullying and harassment by the state of Iowa. And we reviewed data from the district relative to that definition. The next thing we did is we reviewed the Panorama Climate Survey. We looked at participation rates and had quite some good discussions around that. And then we concluded the meeting by recommending topics for discussion for next year.
Thank you. Any questions for SIAC? Equity Committee.
We met and discussed some of the panorama data, which we'll be going over more in detail tonight.
Thank you. And Policy Committee.
Yes. We met at some point, April 19th. Does that sound right? It seems like it was more recent than that. And updated a few policies based on IASB recommendations that the ad hoc committees we folded into the policy with the rest of board committees just to make it a little bit more simple. There's a new policy on licensed employee individual contracts based on recommendations that stakes the contract length. There's a couple that involve teaching and learning that were kind of, I think, came to us after teaching and learning, the curriculum and assessment development, content recommended by IASB, and to define curriculum. And then there's a couple new policies that teaching and learning are going to review further before they come back to us.
Thank you. Questions for Policy Committee? All right, and we do not have anyone signed up to speak under board committee updates. So we will move on to our policies for discussion, which Kelly kind of just reviewed.
Yep, that was it. That was the thorough version. But I'm happy to discuss if there's any questions.
It's kind of related to a question. I know we've simplified down a lot of our policies. So like the board committee policy used to have some things in there more about how we do what we do, which isn't necessarily a policy thing. It's more just how we function. One thing I had heard about kind of around IASB and then over Christmas and January time was that some boards have what might be called like a board handbook or kind of a description of kind of the best practices that the board is currently functions as. I kind of wanted to throw that out maybe to people in discussion here. Is that something we think would be valuable here? Because in the past, we've kind of had a mixture of things in policy or things like we've just done it this way in the past, but it's never really been written down. Is that something we might want to consider in the next, 6 months, a year, just thinking about, is there some models we could use for that, just to kind of how do we function and what are our practices?
So are there things that would be moved out of policy into this handbook, or are you suggesting this would be entirely in addition to the handbook?
Well, like one example I was thinking in this policy that changed is the policy talks about how we have certain committees and how we create committees, but we don't really have anything written down then. Like we used to partially have some things written down about like what are those committees doing, kind of what are they tasked with, how do they function, what are they really looking at? Some things like that. I think some things that maybe have come up in the past in policies are, like communication structure, kind of how that works. It's kind of like the board equivalent of the administrative rules. You know, we set policies and then staff does administrative rules on how the district functions. We don't really have anything like that for the board as far as how we work together. And I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I just wanted to throw that out there as something we had seen in the past. I don't know if would board members think that would be useful or not.
It sounds like it would take a lot of work from us. So the question is, I mean, so,
That's a great
yeah.
comment. Yes.
so I mean, the question is, what is the value added of it? How much do we need that kind of extra description written down or not? And do we have models that we could draw from in developing it? Examples.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we don't need to talk about that here, but if people have any thoughts, maybe that's something to think about in the future. Because yeah, we could find some models maybe. I definitely don't want to make more work for us as volunteers, as we just said.
No, I was going to say, I don't want to make a whole lot of extra work either because the policy process is never ending. But I also think as new board members, having some of those procedures in some place. So maybe we could do some brainstorming about like kind of what are the most important things to know for new board members, or things we really think work well. We want to see happen when there's new board members at our place, and maybe pick some priorities.
I even wonder if, and staff, you're going to have to help me where we are in this massive work we're doing with this policy review, with the 200 series over that kind of guide the board work, as we, perhaps the policy committee could look at, the staff has brought the policies to us in chunks that have been related. So Chris brought business type ones as a chunk. Kristen, you brought a chunk that had to do with HR. Perhaps it's an opportunity to bring a chunk of board related ones together. So we look at it through the lens of, these are the things that guide us. These are the policies, and are there holes? Is there, opportunities for improvement there? And perhaps it is a handbook and some guiding things, but maybe some of that is already there. I think sometimes the challenge when we're looking at one singular policy here that deals with a board related function, but there's other policies that perhaps maybe when we look at all of them, we would see some things that would be opportunities for improvement. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. That would be a good starting place to kind of see what do we have in writing now, and then how might we want to move forward with that. Yeah, I like that idea. And you volunteered the committee that you're on for more work. So.
I know, I realized that.
I noticed that.
Aren't we switching committees soon? I thought that was no.
6 more months.
Alan's committee now, right?
All right. Any other comments or questions on the policies for discussion? Okay, then we will move on to our teaching and learning update, beginning with the materials adoption for AP Government, AP Lit and Composition, and AP Language and Composition. And we'll turn it over to, it looks like Director Miller is not here tonight. Okay. We have some of our lovely Ames High teachers here.
Thank you for our patience. We're a bit of a group tonight.
No problem.
My name is Melissa Carlson. I'm a teaching and learning coordinator, so working with Director Miller, and I'm excited to bring with me, we've got Kirsten Sullivan, who teaches in AP Gov, James Webb, AP Literature and Composition, and Joe Brecke, AP Language and Composition. And so we're bringing forward tonight some recommendations for AP text. As Director Miller described a couple of weeks ago, the process, just an overview, is very similar to what we had shared with you back in April. So we started with just the courses that were available via the AP list on the website. And so it's a little bit more limited when you think about the curriculum options available. From that, it went through the same equity screening that all of our curriculum goes through. So we looked at the visual considerations, representation, diverse perspectives, ability to differentiate for student needs. And then from there, we went ahead and brought it through each department's best practice alignment, and then how does it meet the AP standards as well as the core standards for each class. From here, we're going to have a chance to hear from each teacher about their recommended text. And starting tonight, we'll be able to have the public review available. So the links for the username, password, everything is on the board agenda, as well as the district website. And so that'll be open for 2 weeks, along with a Google form for public to provide their input. Okay, should we dig in? Okay, so if you want to click to the next slide.
Okay, thanks for having us tonight. I'm Kirsten Sullivan. I teach AP Government and Politics. I also teach AP European History, which you did 2 weeks ago. So thanks for that. Appreciate that. Very excited to get new textbooks. I'm so excited to get new textbooks. The AP Government book, we're actually recommending a change. We've used the same author for a while, Edwards, which is an excellent book. But in looking a little more closely at the Wapples book, which is the one that is available for you to preview, we chose it for a couple of reasons. Our course is a semester-long course, and the Edwards book is very dense for a semester-long course to move really quickly. The Wapples book, actually, Karen Wapples is an AP teacher, and she partners with a professor, and they put the book together as a team. And so it really aligns well with the AP curriculum and the pacing. It's a nice foundation. We always supplement with primary sources, and there are required documents, and I teach about 40 different court cases, but there are 15 that are required by the College Board, and it just accents all of that really nicely, and it's paced out really well. It's a great baseline for what we need to be able to dig into the deeper conversations. So I think the biggest reason that we're recommending it over the Edwards that we have used is just a little more accessible, and the supplementary materials are really good. So I highly recommend it. And I'm a PLC of 1, so in both of my courses, but I am a part of a larger group of teachers nationally who have a lot of conversations, and really the Wapples and the Edwards are the 2 most commonly used books, and are both on the College Board requires you to choose from their list. Those are approved if you're going to have AP designation, and so we have to pick from that list. But these are the 2 probably most popular. And when I sent out, like, how are you feeling about using it since I've not used it? What I was seeing in my review of it was what they were saying, so that confirms my thoughts about it. So that's it. That's my recommendation.
Hi, thanks. I'm James Webb. I'm an AP English teacher, AP Lit and Comp. And so, yeah, we're suggesting this text, literature and composition, essential voices, essential skills. As Kirsten mentioned, the College Board redesigned a lot of their AP classes about 2 years ago. And for the first time, they kind of gave us a pacing guide, specific units, and they outlined specific skills that kind of built towards where they want students to be, or where we need our students to be by the end of the year. So that was really helpful when they provided it for us, but in looking at the text that we had, just a lot of things didn't really align. And the last 2 years have been kind of a scramble to get things aligned with this new arrangement. So the nice thing about this text is that it's all been organized based on that kind of pacing guide, and it's around those units of study. Each piece is articulated. There's specific skills that they label for each question. So each question, they know what skill it's being, it's working towards, which helps me and them. And then they also have like essays, practice essays from the prompts. A lot of the authors, 2 of the authors are part of the AP College Board that have helped write those tests. And so they're very familiar with the way those questions are termed and what they're looking for. So seeing that articulation and that integration all throughout the text is incredibly useful. to us. So that's something that's really helpful to us. They have sample tests even in here, so practice tests that are commensurate with what they'll see on the actual AP exam. The other really nice thing is in terms of that equity lens, we have so much better representation in this text. The AP Lit curriculum historically was very much based in kind of the dead white guys model, you know, and their masters. There's a reason we study them, but it's such a narrow scope. And this really opens it up. It's consistent also with the shift in philosophy for the AP College Board, as they're really looking to incorporate more contemporary texts and better representation. And that's what we have in here. A lot of my struggle the last few years has just been finding texts. We want better representation, but you spend hours accessing texts online, and sometimes you get halfway through and realize it's not going to work out for you. They've already gone through and vetted those rich texts, the AP level quality, and got them into one place for us. So not only can I pick a rich text we can all engage with as a whole class, but also I can open it up for choice as well. And that's a big part of our philosophy in our department, is to empower our students to be able to choose. And we also I hope that as our students finally see better representation in the text that we read, we can start to see better representation in our students who take these classes, because that's also a problem with our AP that I think is a part of maybe a bigger issue that I hope we can address in future years.
Thanks, James. I'm Joe Brecke. I teach the language and composition class, and I just want to thank you guys for all your time and energy that you guys put into these decisions. You make a lot of hard decisions. I really hope this is an easy one for you guys. I would just echo the comments of James in regards to the language textbook, and also add that the guy who's the lead author on this, John Williamson, he was in charge of redesigning the AP curriculum for all of the different subjects, and he's the lead author here. And the people who put this together, like James said, are pros, and they've vetted all these materials. They've done the equity work, and they're phenomenal. In addition to the diversity of professional texts, there's also what I love about this book. In just about every chapter, there are student models, and they're getting these from the New York Times. For the last 10 years, the New York Times has done fantastic student writing contests and invited students from all over the world to submit. We've submitted to many of them, and AIM students have received honorable mentions. We don't have any winners yet, but we're getting there. And one of the things that really helps is having models to show you, hey, this is how students can write. You can do this. And throughout this book, there are student models that are really well annotated to show them the moves that writers make. It's just not present in our older book, where it's all professional models. And so that's one more reason to support this new text, which would be the first new text in over a decade. And so a lot's changed in a decade. The topics that kids are interested in, that they're having to wrestle with, just our lifestyle, our culture has changed in 10 years. And so the texts in here are more representative of what people are talking about right now. So those are our recommendations.
Questions from the board?
James, you talked a little bit about representation and choice.
Yeah.
Can you compare and contrast those a little more for us? So if the representation is so full in the textbooks, what are the students choosing? What are you?
So around a particular unit, they'll have maybe 7 or 8 different stories, for example, written from a variety of different decades, from different types of writers, different types of voices, you know, so different minority groups perhaps might be represented. It's just a more diverse, rich range that they can choose from, but they're all based around they're teaching the same skills. So what I've struggled with in the past, I might find one good piece, but then now everyone's going to read that same piece. And so outside of novels, where I'm able to give some choice in our stories and our poetry, it's been more limited. I don't know if I'm answering.
Yes, that's
question.
helpful.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think I'd just thank you for all the effort you put into this. I mean, thank you for all the effort you do every day for teaching this. Those books look very thick, and that's a lot of work to go through. I would compliment you definitely on what you said about, we know that in some of the things we've looked at in the past many years, that student performance, being able to have students be able to see themselves in the content is key. And I love the fact that you're actively making sure that's happening. It's all about the academics and the academic performance, and sounds like that's going to be a great way to improve performance for all our students.
Using my teacher wait time. All right, thank you so much for coming, and like Alan said, thanks for all the work that you do in reviewing these. That's a lot to go through, and we appreciate your recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and we do have one community member signed up to speak after the teaching and learning discussion item. I'm gonna get on the Zoom here and make sure that I can see. And that would be Jenny Mitchell, and I'll let you know when you've been given permission to speak. And you've been given permission to speak.
Hi, my name is Jenny Mitchell. I live at 1416 Boone Street, and I actually want to talk about the AP History textbook. I do oppose the use of this AP History textbook. Last week, after spending over a week reading the entire textbook, I sent the board, the superintendent, Aaron Miller, and several other interested parties my review. This text is biased and opinionated, two things that do not belong in history. There is little to no information about the internet, space exploration, the discovery of cryptocurrency, and even the Korean War. All of this is shadowed by section after section of racial topics, including BLM, but no mention of the 50% increase in the killing of police. In fact, the textbook talks about several cases in which Black and brown people were killed by police, even though the police were not charged. The BLM section fails to mention the organization's actual platform of defunding and abolishing the police, destroying the nuclear family, and that all white people are racist. This section vilifies the police when explaining that the police wore riot gear during the violent protest of BLM. It uses the word violent and protest together, which means they were riots. So there's also no mention of the over $1 billion in damage caused by the BLM riots. Here are a few quotes from the text that show just how opinionated the author is. Quote, Trump appealed successfully to nostalgia for a time when people of color and women knew their place. Quote, thus two versions of America clashed, one based on exclusion and whiteness, the other welcoming and diverse, end quote. Quote, yet the election of Trump to succeed him, Obama, with a campaign that forthrightly appealed to voters hostile to immigration and resentful that a Black man occupied the White House, end quote. I'd also like to comment on the 6 to 8 literacy materials from the EL education. This material is in direct violation with the HF 802. Staff are also protected under this bill. If you follow the links provided in the curriculum, it takes you to blogs and articles which say things like, quote, silence the face of systemic racism, oppression, and is no different than police officers who stood idly by while Mr. Floyd pleaded for his life, end quote. Quote, we must be anti-racist, end quote. Quote, dismantle a system that benefits some but marginalize others, end quote. Quote, white people made this mess, end quote. It also suggests reading books such as White Rage, How to Be an Anti-Racist, this book is anti-racist, and even gives grade levels for who should read this. Our team is already working on turning this curriculum over to the DOE, and I've also sent screenshots of these blogs and articles and lessons plans to legislators. I highly suggest that you find something different. If you need a reminder what HF 802 says, it states that we cannot implement curriculum that implies that the United States of America or the state of Iowa are fundamentally or systemically racist. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jenny. And the next item on our discussion items is the evidence-based staffing model and 2022-23 proposed new money budget. Dr. Vincent.
Thank you. Let's see if the slides come up here. If you want to go ahead and go to the slideshow in the first PDF, that'd be great. Thank you. So Chris Stensland and I will go through both just a very high-level review of the staffing model, which we used this year as we identified staffing patterns, and also a quick review of the high level of our new money budget. The staffing model, as some of you know, has been developed over a period of decades out of work at the University of Wisconsin. That reference is there for those that may be interested. Just some key components. The model is an intersection, if you will, of efficiency in school systems alongside effective schools. So those that get high levels of outcomes of student academic and well-being sorts of measures. In their model, they are the first to acknowledge there are pieces where there is a deep research base, and there are pieces where it is more difficult to have a research base. Where they can, they have referenced under each recommendation all of the study mostly over the last 20 years that provides information that should inform our actions. So they also emphasize to a great extent the core teaching. And I think we just saw some examples of why teachers can make such a difference in a classroom. But you see the recommendations here. They also acknowledge, while the core teachers are perhaps that first piece you want to focus on, the research base behind the early primary and the preschool is not as sound as perhaps some of the other components. And they would encourage systems as you work towards implementing the model that the very low class sizes are perhaps the last component that you address. And we also appreciate in schools, our highest costs by far have to do with staff and staffing. So there's some real challenges there if we were going to approach these levels. They also then move from that core classrooms. We'll stay on that same slide just a little bit longer. They bring in the recognition that how important collaborative time is for teachers. And in order for teachers to have collaborative time and planning time, you have to provide other alternatives. You also, in many communities, have a high interest in more of a liberal arts sort of focus. And their recommendation over time is that you add on top of your core classrooms, you see the percentages here, 20% and 33% respectively, additional teachers in some of those related arts areas, again, for the benefit of that education in and of itself, and also so that there's give and take of planning time and release time where you don't have direct instruction with students. One of the pieces about this model that I really appreciate that is unique maybe in some systems is having a way to determine when do you bring additional resources and how do you make sure those resources are allocated to the highest need locations. So they actually have formulas based over, again, time that identify perhaps it's a language barrier, perhaps it's a challenge of a learning of some sort, perhaps it's a poverty factor. There are multiple factors that possibly, not always, but possibly make learning more challenging, and recommend prorating the allocation of staff specifically to where those populations are. So that is a quick overview of how we arrived at recommendations for staffing in our schools. If we go to the next slide, after you have the instructional component in place, there's also recognition of particularly those areas where I might call it well-being or just other components of the school day. And you see the recommendations there for guidance support, nursing, library help. We'll move to the final slide. They also have recommendations of what is typical or what can be accomplished in these high functioning schools in terms of staffing ratios for administrators and district office staff. So with that, wanting to move to, given those, before we shift gears here real quick, I would say the community of Ames should feel very good about where the school system is. Many of those components we could meet. Other places, even in a time of reducing budgets, we could make adjustments to move us closer to that model. And so over a period of years, I think the district is well poised to be able to be quite in line with both that goal of efficiency as well as high student outcomes. But much of the work obviously happened in years past to have us be as close as we are to the model at this point. So with that, maybe pause if there's any comments or questions, knowing that we'll move then to, so what would our recommendations be for change between this year and next year, given our budget new money picture? Any questions before we proceed? Okay. Stencil.
So as we work through this, we want to recognize that we tried very hard to prioritize services and programs for students in an environment of insufficient revenue growth. I mean, school districts in Iowa are just not being given the revenue they need to operate in the level we believe we need to operate, but that is what the environment we're in, and statutorily we have to stay within the spending authority given to us through the formula. The proposed detail for the budget not only includes budget reduction, but also includes budget increases, because budgets aren't always about cutting. Sometimes they're about adding. We did have a number of positions that we added in FY22 that we knew were going to be one-time expenditures against our spending authority, and that we would need to, if we were going to continue those on, we would need to address those as part of the budget. You'll see those listed on the screen with FY22 behind them. That means those things happened within this fiscal year. With the opening of the new high school, we recognize that there's going to be some additional needs there. That building has not had a dedicated teacher technology librarian, so we are proposing to add that. We also recognize that we're going to need additional custodial because that building is big. So we're proposing, not all 4 of those are proposed at the high school. We have, as we've added space in the past, not necessarily added to our custodial at the elementary too. So Jerry said he thought he needed about 4 additional to cover all of the space within the district. And we're going to, you'll see below there's a reduction of an administrator within athletics, but we're adding additional clerical help to help take some of that, that workload. We, at the last meeting, you proposed the extension of the Durham contract, and that does have an increase in that for routes. And then there's that mid-year hourly increase we did for all the hourly employees. The staffing model, for other than the transportation savings, which we've talked about several times with the staggered start times, all of the recommendations are based on the staffing model and what the staffing model indicates we need for staffing. We are hedging a little bit on a couple positions that we think the staffing model says at this point, but we're nervous about fall. So rather than reducing those, we're moving those to ESSER. We're hoping, especially with the permanent subs, that maybe the absence situation that we've been in for the last 2 years will resolve as we move out of the pandemic and become more into the, what's the word, endemic? And we'll have to make a decision in 2 years whether we keep those permanent subs. If you could pull up the second spreadsheet, Eric. I meant to start with this one. No, it was the second tab on that. Yeah, second tab there. Thank you. You'll notice on the left-hand side of the sheet that we were just looking at, there was a number for salary and benefit increases. And if you were wondering how we got to that total, this is how. Now, this is total package cost, while the percentages are just for the salary increases. We did acknowledge those mid-year increases for those hourly groups, as well as what we would propose for the increases for those hourly groups for FY20, and then showed year after year what the increases for those groups from July 1st of 22 through July 1st of, 21 to 22. And then the proposed recommendations plus what you've already acted on for the superintendent for the salaried employees. And that is where we get the $1.4 million for the increases in salary. So I think that about covers it, and we'll be happy to answer your questions.
So you reviewed what the recommendations are for teacher staff ratios. Where will this put us in terms of, or teacher student ratios rather? Where will this put us in terms of teacher pupil ratios?
I can speak to the guidelines that we'll use at the class level.
Right.
We haven't recalculated where that would put us. There's two different things. One is what's the teacher pupil ratio right in a classroom? And then generally, what's the staff to pupil ratio? And that I have not recalculated. In our elementaries, in the early elementary ages, we intend to staff to a range up to 1 to 23. And then the remainder, 4th grade through 12th grade, 1 to 25.
Okay. So up to 1 to 23, but there's going to be some variability across the schools?
There will likely be. Again, as you know, we're trying to serve students in their home attendance centers.
Right.
That work is occurring right now. We have families that have asked to come into the district. That will occur closer to July 1, and that it depend on what we have in terms of registration and showing now. And then being in a community such as we are, there will be movement in August as families come and go. But yes, that's an ongoing process that really occurs throughout the year, and adjustments may need to be made. But we are in a position, technology has helped us a great deal. We have a very efficient registration staff that works very hard at this. Dr. Hawkins gives us a great deal of attention as well. So we would anticipate that we will be able to stay pretty close to those ratios, but there's always give and take. We have some choices we can make too with that ESSER funding, as we alluded to in the new budget, a new money budget, particularly as we get updated information on what do the student populations look like in different buildings, where might we have higher concentrations of students that perhaps could really benefit from increased teacher support.
And there's always some will be below, some classes obviously will be below those caps. There's always sometimes in situations where you might end up with 51 kids in 2 sections, and adding a section for one student isn't something that is financially viable. So you may end up with a 25 and a 26. Those things just kind of work their way through the year, because we'll have students ebb and flow through the year as well, even between our buildings. So I don't want anybody to get the impression that those are hard and fast caps. Otherwise, we'd be moving students around more than we are.
So these evidence-based recommendations for student-teacher ratios, I assume there's probably some give and take within a classroom. Like I would assume that there might be a rule of thumb where, like, if you increase student-teacher ratios, then you probably also need more support staff.
Correct.
Right.
1 to 20 or 1 to 33%. Yes.
Right. So one would
yes.
mean, like, if you bump up from, I mean, they recommend 1 to 17. If we bump it up to 1 to 24 or 23, then we might, I think 23 is what you said. So if we bump it up to 1 to 23, then we might need additional support staff in the classroom. How does that play out?
It's a combination of things. You run into several issues. You run into actual number of classrooms. So if you have 15 students in every class as opposed to 23, you can consider pretty quickly how many more classrooms you need. And then for every classroom teacher, if you allow everyone to have what we hope is maybe 40 to 45 minutes of prep time a day, and you want collaboration time for small groups of teachers, you can see how that multiplies. And that's why those ratios, while you can sometimes demonstrate great results with that, not always, there's conflicting research there on that number. That's why I think they recommend that as here's a perhaps thing to think about, but they don't push that one very hard in their research, because I think being able to do that type of input over time and showing a significant difference has been very difficult to come up with. But I'm not sure if I'm getting to all of your aspects, but it definitely drives off of those core classrooms or number of classrooms, and that also drives then levels of administration, levels of dollars set aside for instructional materials, all those pieces.
Yeah. And
So
as
my
we,
question, oh, I'm sorry.
as we talked about during budget, we're talking about those core regular ed classrooms.
Right.
On top of that, you're going to layer your special ed supports, your EL supports, your Title I supports, so the supports are going to be leveled in to help with, but we're just looking at that core classroom teacher so if you took all the adults in the building, that ratio is going to be much lower.
Yeah, okay, I understand that. So sorry, I don't think I expressed my question very well. So my question was, if you increase teacher pupil ratio, then do you need to decrease, say, EA to pupil ratio?
And
to compensate for larger classroom sizes?
Interestingly, that is a choice that can be considered. It really, in the schools with the highest performance outcomes, and mostly the research from those that have also high factors of mobility, high factors of poverty, et cetera, you typically get much stronger outcomes when you increase your core teachers or certified teachers versus associates. So you might use associates for those times like recess duty, helping to supervise lunch, but keep the concentration of instruction with certified licensed teachers. So this model actually de-emphasizes use of associates in lieu of teachers, totally recognizes the value they can have and the value they bring in some of that more supervision role or under the direction of the licensed teacher. Please.
Might be helpful just from a pragmatic standpoint to understand that the class sizes that are being discussed currently are the exact same that they are this year for kindergarten, first and second grade, and are actually 2 kids less for third, fourth, and fifth graders.
Thank you.
I don't have a question. I have more of a comment of thank you for bringing this evidence-based model. I think that's something I've found a little bit lacking maybe in the past, of having almost like a neutral third party that is something we can benchmark against and see how we are doing. I think that's a very good model that I would like to see as Dr. Lawson comes. If he thinks that's something we could continue, it would make sense, because I think it makes a lot of these discussions and looking at the numbers make more sense, because it's not reacting to where we are and where making small changes. It's looking at the system as a whole each time, kind of like zero-based budgeting. I think a really good model, and I'd encourage us as a district to think about continuing with that.
The textbook will be on the corner of his desk.
It was, since I've been here through the last 7 years, I was very surprised at how close we were to the model. I think we all went in with some assumptions about certain programs, certain buildings that we thought might not be in line with it, and they were. So I was very surprised and pleased with that we were very close to the model to begin with. One of the reasons we're able to have the reductions in those elementary sections is because the funding's a year behind. And so when we had the big loss on students during COVID, those teachers were already on contract. So our class sizes ended up being much smaller that year because we were on the year before. So we're catching up to those head counts and to that funding.
Okay, looks like we are ready to move on. And the next item on our agenda is our public forum. So I will go ahead and open the public forum and I will read our statement on public comments. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And we'll begin with Monique Bacon.
Good evening. My name is Monique Binkin and I live at 4810 Dover Drive. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Ames Youth and School Action Team, also known as ASAT. ASAT is a nonpartisan group of concerned citizens whose intention is to shine light on racial and ethnic disparities that exist throughout the Ames Community School District. Our goal is to improve educational opportunities for children of color and other marginalized groups. One of ASAT's frequent requests is for the district to make more of an effort to ensure that it provides a curriculum that is rigorous and culturally relevant for all learners. We believe that the proposed 6th through 8th grade literacy curriculum moves us in the right direction. ASAT realizes that curriculum choices are now extremely political and everyone suddenly believes that they are a K-12 education expert in every subject. So while the board makes its way through the many comments you may receive about the materials, ASAT wanted to take this opportunity to thank the district and the board for making the effort to update students' learning materials in ways that will help them navigate the complicated world they will enter upon graduation. We hope that the adoption of these materials can serve as a concrete step towards addressing the academic disparities in our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. Jenya Coffey.
Hello, I'm Jenya Coffey. I live at 2205 Prairie View East. I'm also a teacher at the middle school and a parent of a child at the middle school. So I'm talking with my teacher at the middle school hat at the moment. When we heard about today's curriculum discussion, a couple of things were said by the high school teachers that I think we feel very much the same at the middle school, if not more so. They discussed this like scramble to find the materials to even start your lessons from. So regardless of what curriculum we adopt or don't adopt, I still have to take what I'm given and then make sure I'm meeting state standards, make sure I'm meeting the needs of the kids in my classroom and adapt it to make it work. Right now, as a middle school teacher, I don't have a curriculum beyond the state standards and our district essential standards. So there is no textbook where I have some stuff to adapt. So I'm spending a lot of time finding that stuff. When I spend that time finding that stuff, it's less time I spend adapting it and presenting it well. When it's less time that I have to do that, it's even less time I have to respond and provide feedback for the students on how they're meeting those standards. I'm not saying that any curriculum is better than another or that, but I am saying like, we don't have a curriculum. We don't have materials. Like, so, I mean, curriculum means a lot of things. At the end of the day, the curriculum is what I teach my students when they come in the room. I would like to have some materials with which to start from so that I can use my years of experience and expertise in making sure that I'm delivering it in a way that meets our district essential standards, in a way that meets our state laws. If I don't have anything to start with, I'm going to spend all my time looking for it. That is a big part of why I resigned this year, is the amount of time that I have to spend outside of my contract hours just to be able to do what I feel is the bare minimum to meet the needs of the students. It's not tenable for teachers to keep spending that much time creating things and finding things. So I encourage you to know that when we propose curriculums as a district, that a lot of work has been done to try to find something that's going to work. And I encourage you to know that our teachers have a lot of experience and education and wisdom behind them to take whatever materials that you give us and be sure to turn it into what's the best education we can for the students. So please help us to do that by accepting these curriculum proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenya. Catherine Fromm. No, you can sit. If you sit here, you just need to turn the microphone. You just need to turn the microphone on if you sit there.
Well, I'm Catherine Barber Fromm. I've been here many times. As I've said before, we dragged Ames kicking and screaming into the 20th century and gave it our best shot. I would like to say on behalf of those of us who lived here that we owe a debt of gratitude to Dr. Clemmy Jackson and Dr. Anthony Jones, who were put in positions in trying to interpret and take care of situations which should not have happened to begin with. It was the habit of this district, for God knows what reason, to go out to small towns in Iowa and find the smallest town they could find, which I never heard of, and I know a lot, and find personnel to be principals in our schools. And it hasn't worked many times. One time we had someone and I said, "Why'd you hire that person?" And the person said, "Well, they're, from a school a similar size of Ames." Really? I asked, why then would we why wouldn't we have somebody who came from the south side of Chicago with a similar size of Ames? And you all know the answer to that question. This has been difficult oftentimes for the rest of us to try to interpret, to try to make these people understand what this community is all about. And it was seldom about the small town values of Iowa. We all came from different places. We were all of different backgrounds. I once said that I was in every minority group the school district had, and it followed me like the plague. But the fact is, we probably will now come to a point which we will make more intelligent decisions. Now, as to that ugly building, and I'm glad I voted no, there are things that we do need to do. I don't know who is going to be in charge of deciding names for things. But we did have at the high school a library dedicated to Ralph Farrar. Now, Ralph Farrar would about die if he knew I was up here asking a building be named for him, since he and I argued all the time, quite a bit, maybe too many times. But the fact is that this community is not a bus station. We have very little sense of permanence, and people begin with each generation and think they're, inventing the wheel, which they are not. And we need more sense of permanence, and it's something that you all need to consider in the decisions you make. We had some dedication of stones, which included my children, at the other high school, and I do wonder whether we're going to add those on to the new school. I hope that this school on the inside has all of the teaching models and methods which people wanted, but nobody really cared about what it looked like. And we do not like it. I would like to also add that I don't think you passed a resolution against the private school money being diverted by the governor, which other school districts did. And you better be really mindful of this, because if passed in this session, which apparently it will not be, it's $55 million that somebody isn't going to get. And there is quite opposition to it. And of course, the governor thinks she's going to bring it up next year among all her other proposals to punish public education for God knows what reason. I'd like to add that in the wake of the decisions made by the legislature, you all had better refashion the foundation of this district to gain money, because you're going to need it, because there isn't going to be enough money. We could have public schools fighting the universities. We could have all kinds of scenarios of people battling for the few dollars that there are. And the legislature passed a bill meaning that in order to raise taxes, it takes a 2/3 vote. We did that in California also, but because in California, everybody's a Democrat, it doesn't matter, but it does matter here. And it does mean that we're turning this state back to the 50s. It has been commented on by even Rika Basu, and a lot of us don't like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And then we do have one more participant who signed up online to speak. Jean Muhammad, you've been given permission to speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, there, now we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Jean Muhammad, and I'm a student and family advocate at Ames High School. Tonight, I'm reading this letter in representation of all those who signed below. After reviewing the district's proposed English language curriculum for 6th, 7th, and 8th grades, we support and encourage the academic rigor, high interest, and representation within these materials, and feel that they will engage our diverse population of students. We also want to acknowledge that, as educators, ARC of Ames reviewed these new materials and found them in compliance with state law. Those signed below are in support of these new curriculum adoptions that have been selected with diversity, equity, and inclusion in mind. Signatures include Richard Robke, Steph Shares, Liz Love, Jessica Sidler, Nicole Coronado, Rachel Crofta, Andrea Delman, Missy Springsteen-Hopt, Jody Lickhart, Emily Spursflege, Ashley Morgan, Eric Shares, Stephanie Myers, Leanne Roberg Johnson, Brianna Van Dyke, Imani Du Bois, Deanna Powell, Shaylee Santiago, Karen Klotzbach, Nicole Drake Strabala, Gretchen Mosher, Madeline Anderson, Hannah Hanover, Ellen Grimm, Jenya Coffey, Jennifer Hagland, Robin Reeseter, Caitlin Briere, Charles W. Inglicus II, Barb Wheelock, Riley Drake, Corey Carell, Catherine Arnold, Pastor Ryan Arnold, Anita Rollins, Sarah Markley, Caitlin Austin, Heidi Ropke, Diana Figueredo, Juan Cordoba, Andres Cordoba, and myself, Jean Muhammad. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. All right, that is everyone who was signed up to speak as part of the public forum. So I will go ahead and close our public forum and we will move on to our consent agenda, and I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval of the consent items as presented.
Second. Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Franzen. Superintendent Vincent?
Once again, we have several contributions to the district. We'd like to express appreciation to Healthiest Ames, Mary Greeley Medical Center, and Skunk River Cycles for donations of bike helmets to be used in our 3rd and 4th grade levels. Also, cash contributions from the Ames Golden Kiwanis, Anonymous, Iowa State University Office of Sponsored Programs Administration staff, and Kona Ice. And these represent both cash and book contributions, again, for elementaries and also preschool.
Thank you. All right, it was moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Franzen to accept the consent items as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Moving on to our action items, we first have the 2021-22 proposed budget amendment.
I move the board order the board secretary to publish the proposed budget amendment and to set the date and time of the public hearing for May 16, 2022 at 6:30 p.m.
Second. Moved by Franzen, seconded by Linkaitis. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Materials adoption for AP European History, AP Psychology, and AP US History.
I move we approve the adoption of the AP textbooks as presented.
Second. Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Smith. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. 6 to 8, literacy materials adoption.
I move we approve the adoption of EL education as our 6 to 8 literacy curriculum resource.
Second.
Moved by Smith, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Policies for action.
I move the board approve the policies as presented.
Second.
Moved by Franzen, seconded by Smith. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Moving on to our board and staff items. We'll start with items from the board, and I did not note any requests from staff this evening. Are there any other items from the board?
Just to I would remind everybody that this is Teacher Appreciation Week, generally Staff Appreciation Week. The last few years have been pretty tough for staff and everybody related to schools. So if you know a teacher, see a teacher or a staff member, thank them again, give them a cookie, give them whatever they like, thank them. So that's my thing.
I also wanted to ask about the data, the report on disciplinary data that we were working towards, and I've been thinking about it this afternoon, we were working towards getting reports on disciplinary data, and I'm not sure where we are on that. So I wanted to just move the bookmark or the whatever it is for it. Let us please remember to get these data.
As you know, this evening we have the panorama data.
Right.
We believe that another part of that data set is responding to our district goals and objectives.
Right.
And we're working towards that presentation, possibly that first meeting in June as that work session. So a subset of that is some of the disciplinary data as well. So
okay,
yeah, it hasn't fallen off of our radar. We're not quite ready, but we think a work session would be a good time to be able to bring that more comprehensive look at all of our data.
Okay. And will Dr. Lawson be able to be at that meeting too?
That we are coordinating those details, and as of this date, yes, but there's a little bit of tentativeness due to some travel arrangements, but we agree that would be really, really helpful, and we're going to try to make that work.
Okay, so that work session would include the disciplinary data, further discussion of the panorama data, or no? Sorry, I missed something.
I probably put too many things in there. Panorama this evening.
Right, yes.
Response to our district goals and identifying those data sets that we want to make sure we are moving forward on. But some of the goals do speak to some of our discipline data. So you'll get the panorama tonight and more comprehensively if we are able to get that work session in place in that first meeting in June.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
This is a little less significant, but I think it's worthy noting when I was listening to Superintendent Vincent talk about the gifts from the community. I want to make sure everybody in this community understands that every single child in this district in either 3rd or 4th grade, I think it's 3rd, gets a bike helmet. And they even did it during COVID. And so I just think it's great, something to celebrate of that community partnership that they're reaching all of our children.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for those. And items from the superintendent.
Also be a little bit redundant and just remind people it is Teacher Appreciation. And we are all very cognizant of the strong research base that is there about the quality of teachers and the difference they make in the lives of children. And also really appreciate the efforts the board is making to acknowledge not only our teachers, but all of our staff. Obviously, we can't meet our mission without high quality staff, including board members. So just wanted to add my thanks to that.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the board planning calendar. We are getting close to the end of this cycle. We do have a meeting on May 16th. And then as Superintendent Vincent mentioned, we have a meeting June 6th with a work session following, and then another meeting on June 20th. Any other questions on the board planning calendar or comments? All right.
There's a second page to it, so we're not actually getting to the
Well,
end of it.
the school year, this part is ending.
Would be nice.
And Superintendent Vincent's part will be ending.
Her part will be out.
Which is sad.
This is true.
It's exciting, but also sad. Okay. We will take a 5-minute recess and then we will move into our work session and we'll be ending our YouTube broadcast at this time.